Hello again, and thank you for joining us on the Providence College Podcast. I'm Charlie Joyce, your host today, and I'm joined by our producer, Chris Judge, of the class of 2005. Our guest is Margaret Van Name, a graduate of the class of 2012, who is a registered nurse. Meg is a traveling nurse who not only has crossed the country, but also has been on the front lines of the coronavirus pandemic. She's worked at major urban medical centers and hospitals since earning her Bachelor of Science in Nursing degree from Duke University in December 2016. Meg was a member of the Liberal Arts Honors Program at PC. She majored in health policy and management and was an art history minor. She also was a member of Student Congress and of the women's indoor and outdoor track teams, captaining the team her senior year. Meg, welcome to the Providence College Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You've served in 6 states so far, and including medical facilities in Boston, San Diego, Seattle, and New York City. What is life like on the road as a traveling nurse?
Life on the road is very different. There's a lot of highs and a lot of lows. You get a feel of what it's like to be on your own and to be independent, but there's also a sense of adventure that comes with that. You kind of miss the day-to-day, the middle ground, because you're constantly moving and changing and facing new challenges and meeting new people. There were a lot of good times. I really enjoyed the experiences that I have, and the travel nurse community is awesome. There's a lot of us out there who are doing this. And so you're connected with a lot of resources to teach you about, what it's like to be changing facilities and where you should be looking for certain things. And it's also a good community for activities. We all work these weird hours and weird schedules and are in new cities. And so there's a lot of resources for your days off, like, hey, we're all going to go for a hike. And that was always a good way to meet new people all over the country.
Right. And why did you choose to start your career this way, Meg?
I chose it. It was a couple of different reasons. It's kind of twofold. There's the sense of adventure that you have, and then there's the experiences you can gain professionally and medically. I had lived in the Northeast and gone to school in Providence and kind of lived up there my whole life. And when I went to nursing school, I went down to Durham, and the South is a very different community. And I really engaged with the people there and enjoyed the weather. It was so warm. And I thought, where else could I also make that connection with people? And so I started to explore in different cities and traveled a bit. I got to work at different medical centers. My original medical center, I did a medical step-down unit. But then with each hospital you go to, there's big academic institutions, there's small community hospitals. Sometimes you're on a floor that specializes in neurology or cardiology. And so you learn those fields a lot better, and it makes you a really quick learner. And so as somebody who did nursing second degree and kind of started later in life, it gave me the opportunity to check out those specialties and kind of figure out what I wanted to do professionally. And I think it also helps you to connect with the community and connect with the people around you. And you learn about people and why you do things the way you do, or why you believe things the way you believe them, not only personally, but medically, like why you chose something in your lifestyle or why you do or do not want this treatment. And it kind of makes you a better person and a better nurse because you can understand your patients.
And I know you're relatively early into your career and you moved around pretty frequently, but did you get a sense for, like, are medical practices and philosophies really different in different regions of the country?
Yes and no. The general practices are pretty much the same, and we use evidence-based practice in most institutions. But the way that people go about making their choices as patients, I think, is different. And one of the hospitals, actually, I always remember this, when I was in Denver, one of the physicians said that he moved there specifically because the community there adapted the lifestyle that he that he liked. And he was a cardiologist. And so we were, preaching to these people about changing their diet and changing their lifestyle. And in Colorado, that is your lifestyle. And he was like, it was so much easier to practice medicine somewhere where this is already ingrained in you.
And was there a part of you that really wanted to see, other parts of the country, Meg?
Definitely. I definitely wanted to see what else was out there. I don't think I ever would have driven across the country many different times and seen, what's going on in the middle without that. And, living in San Diego, I got to live right near the beach, which was great. And I definitely enjoyed seeing the different cities and checking out the differences.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite city or assignment, would you say, as you look back?
They don't always go hand in hand. I really enjoyed my hospital in Denver. I worked at the Medical Center of the Rockies, and we just had a great team, and I learned so much there. But I think the city I liked the best was probably Seattle. It's very vibrant and energetic, and there's a lot going on, but then you get 20 minutes outside and you're in nature and you're in the mountains, and that was so fun.
Interesting. You earned your BSN at Duke, and after that, you were a staff nurse for 15 months in the new graduate nurse residency program at the University of North Carolina Medical Center. Give us an overview overall of your work, since then, and the medical units or areas you served, and you did make reference to a couple.
So when I left UNC, I went to Brigham and Women's in Boston, and I worked on one of their telemetry floors there, which was cardiac monitoring, but a lot of different diagnoses. And then from there, I moved to San Diego, which I actually stayed there for 6 months. And that unit was an epilepsy and neurology unit. So we took in patients who were going through trials on seizure drugs. And then from there, I went to Loveland, Colorado, up north of Denver, and I was on the cardiothoracic unit, which was more of a surgery and heart surgery and lung surgery unit. And then from there, I went to Seattle, and Seattle, I worked on a neurology unit. And then from Seattle, I went to Charlotte, which was also a neurology unit. So that had a little bit of continuity.
Well, as of September, you're now a senior staff member in intensive care at Langone Medical Center at New York University. Langone is a premier academic medical center. What is that role like, Meg? And were you intentionally seeking a position in the academic medical setting, especially at that level?
So yeah, my new job at Langone is a little bit different. It's the first permanent job I've had in a while, which will be interesting. I think it's going to be a good learning curve. I'm still going to be floating amongst the intensive care units, so I still have that change and that fast pace that I really liked about travel nursing. There's definitely benefits to being a staff member in a hospital system as opposed to being a travel there or just being there, for a short period of time. I think it's going to provide a lot of opportunity for growth because you can move professionally and academically within a hospital system once you're established there, and you get to work on projects and committees, and those types of things are not always offered as a travel nurse because you're only there for a short period of time. As for the academic medical setting part of it, I think that's kind of how I started out at UNC, which I really liked. And I think that going forward, that's a good place to be. I mean, obviously our world is revolving around these changes in medicine and science, and what better place to be than at the forefront of it and learning right alongside other medical professionals and other researchers, like right there with them.
You grew up in Stamford, Connecticut, not far from New York City, and you worked at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in the city for 3 years after graduating from PC. Are you thinking maybe now that New York may be more of a permanent home for a while?
I think it will be for a while. I was intentionally moving eastward with my travels when all of this happened in New York. And now, given the nature of what's going on, it's going to be nice to be closer to home. Some of the things that I was missing while I was traveling, like birthdays and baby showers and things for my friends, I want to make sure I'm going to be a part of. And, my brother's getting married this year, and you want to be around in the area for that sort of thing, especially with, who knows, with borders and having to do testing, going in and out of different states. Right now, it's nice to stay put a little bit.
Sure. Let's talk about the coronavirus, Meg. You were working in Charlotte when the pandemic struck the region in March. Then you moved on to New York Presbyterian Columbia Hospital, when really New York was very much at the epicenter nationally of this pandemic. Did you do that by choice?
I did. I was in Charlotte, and I was working at the medical center there when it hit. And like every place that was doing the same thing, we were preparing for what was going to happen. And our unit in North Carolina turned into the COVID unit, and we started adapting to the new protocols. And I, being a travel nurse, started getting calls about New York, because as a part of this travel nurse, you're in this registry and they know that you're available to do work. So I was getting calls, and I started talking to my family and my friends about it, like maybe I should go. And we talked about it, and we're like, it's really dangerous. Who knows what's happening? I'll just stay where I am. And so that was probably, mid-March. And then I remember the next week it was happening again. And we in Charlotte were changing to everything, all the protocols that were happening. And we were trying to get a float of what was going on, but it wasn't that bad. Like, we had patients and we were full, but we had closed down our optional surgeries and that sort of thing. And we weren't that bad. And I kept hearing from my family, my friends, what it was like in New York. And I lived there, I have friends who were nurses who are working up there. My sister is a nurse and she was up there. And I just felt like I had to go. And so I answered one of those calls, and they said, when can you start? And I started the next week. And, I worked in Charlotte on a Friday and was working in New York on Monday.
Wow. That's pretty impressive, pretty quick. What a turnaround. What was it like working in New York at that particular time?
It was the hardest job that I've had. It was definitely the hardest nursing job that I had. Things changed really fast, and we were getting information every day about protocols and PPE and things that we should be and shouldn't be doing. And nurses in particular, we had to take on all of these roles that we wouldn't necessarily be doing in the past. And patients couldn't have family members there with them, and they were alone, and you're trying to be their nurse and also their friend and the person they could talk to, and you're trying to get families to be able to FaceTime in, and you're just really tired a lot. And it was sad at times because things were changing really fast and people got sick really fast. And as a nurse or as a medical person, you believe in all of this science and all this training that you've had, and this happens, and so you do this. And with the coronavirus, we just didn't know, and not having those answers to provide to our patients, not being able to give them that comfort, it was pretty devastating.
Yeah, obviously a real emotional time. Well, what got you through the shifts and that period of time overall, Meg?
It was a lot of support. Your family and friends, you really lean on those support systems. My brother and his fiance, both Providence grads, they gave up their apartment to me, and they moved in with her parents and quarantined with them so that I would have a place to live while I was doing this. My sisters, my parents, I called them all the time. My friends were checking in. They were sending me copies, sending me coloring books, things to pass the time. And having nurse friends was really helpful, because there are times where you really needed to kind of vent and tell people, I had to tell you something really sad or really traumatizing or like something horrible that happened at work. And like, I don't want to tell my parents that and scare them. My nurse friends can understand what's happening. And so having that support was really helpful. I definitely ran all the time. That's something from Providence that I always take away. On my days off, I feel like running gave me a place to clear my head a little bit. And then the New York community was great. Everybody at 7:00 every night would go outside their windows and bang pots and pans and clap for the healthcare workers. And you could feel their support. And you could also feel their support in that the streets and the subways and everywhere was empty, and you knew that people were staying home and they were listening to what they were being told, and that they know that like we were doing what we could to help them, and so they had to do what they could to help us.
Wow. Being entrenched kind of as the way you were as a medical professional, so close to in the midst of COVID-19, are you kind of intrigued at all by this virus? Have you had a chance really to analyze it through your experiences or otherwise?
I've thought a lot about it, and I've experienced a lot of it, but I've also read a lot about it, and it's very interesting. And the interesting part is that we don't know, and that we're learning so rapidly, but it's actually going to take years to see what the long-term effects are, or what's actually going to happen to these patients and how it's going to affect their body systems, and which treatments are actually going to work the best. There's a lot we just don't know. And with the antibody testing, like we don't actually know what any of this means yet. And that's one of the most interesting parts. We thought it was a respiratory illness, and then we thought it had to do with clotting factors. And it's just this whole multi-system, multifaceted virus. And, during it, when I was working, I honestly tried to stay away from the news and from articles. And I would look at it a little bit, but there was so much information being passed around, and it was definitely overwhelming. And I think we all have to kind of look at our resources and take in what we can, but understand that there's so much more to be learned. I mean, even if we look at the school children, everybody's opening schools now, and at first we didn't think kids could get it, and then we did, but now we're not sure how it's spreading or what that means. And it's good to stay informed, but the answers, they're just changing so quickly. And the best source for me and for my coworkers, I think, was that we were getting information at the hospital, like these are the changes that are happening and this is what we need to do today. And that's what we had to base all of our information off of.
Let's take a lighter turn and talk about your undergraduate days at PC. You studied health policy and management. Was nursing always a consideration for you, or were there other points of direction that you were thinking about?
Yeah, I definitely did not think I was going to be a nurse. I was undeclared, and I knew that I really liked art history and was pursuing that for a while, but I needed to, decide a major. And a friend of mine actually recommended a health policy, and I took Dr. Levine's Intro to Health Policy class and was sold. And I just loved that whole major. And then after Providence, when I went to work at Sloan Kettering, I worked in their outpatient clinic, which was the first time I really got to work anywhere clinical. And they gave a lot of great opportunities for shadowing and, exploring your prerequisite options to go back to do these clinical roles. So I actually shadowed occupational therapists, physical therapists, nurses, and then I started taking my prereqs for nursing school, and I finished all of those while working at Sloan. And then I went to Duke and became a nurse, and I love it. Love being a nurse.
Wow, quite the story, quite the story. You kept really busy when you were at PC. I mean, between being in the honors program and in student congress and on the track team. What did you enjoy the most, Meg, when you were here?
I loved being on the track team. I loved, being with some of my best friends I've met on the track team, and we're still good friends. And, you're living and you're working with your friends. And I remember we would have practice at 7 in the morning, which at the time seemed so early. And then we'd all go to Ray afterwards and kind of hang out there and eat and catch up on homework and just spending all that time together doing your day-to-day stuff, especially now in these times, having lived alone and in lots of different parts of the country by myself. I really miss those days when I was around all the people that I cared about all the time. And I mean, I was also part of a really great department. The health policy program is a smaller department, and I felt like our professors knew us really well and pushed us to succeed. And Dr. Hackey pushed me to be a part of the undergraduate research conference, and I'm so glad I did that. And they really just instilled in us lifelong learning, and I've continued that on through my career.
What experiences or lessons from your undergraduate days have you carried, do you think, with you in your life since graduating?
I think one of the things is probably the importance of questioning things. On Student Congress, we questioned everything, and we were constantly trying to make our campus better. And, it doesn't have to be broken for you to ask, why is something done this way and how can we make it better? And that's what we, going forward out of Providence, have to do to make our world better, because we're all part of this community. And I think Providence really emphasized that you're a part of a community, not just on campus, but beyond campus. And we're all connected together. It's not necessarily the classes or the lectures that you remember, but you remember the connectedness you had with each other. And I also think, Father Shanley always talked about having a calling. And I always thought, I'm sure people do, but I don't. I don't have a calling. And even going into nursing, I didn't think at the time like, oh, I found it, this is my calling. But then when I got, the call to go to New York, I was like, okay, I understand what he was talking about. There are times where like choices come up in your life and you are being pulled somewhere and you know that it's for a reason, and everything starts adding up.
Wow. That's pretty powerful. Yeah, it sounds like you're very happy in this calling for sure.
I am.
Meg, it's been a delight to speak with another alum who is so dedicated and passionate about their career. Thanks so much for being our guest today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
And thanks to you, our listeners, for joining us on the Providence College Podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast in all the usual places: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube. Thanks again to our producer, Chris Judge. I'm Charlie Joyce. Until next time.